Well, good morning and happy Father's Day. It's a beautiful day in Southern California. I hope it's a beautiful day wherever you are. To all of you fathers out there, have a wonderful, happy, rewarding Father's Day. I hope you've already had that when you read this. I hope you're doing more important things than watching me, and that you're out with your family enjoying yourself. I'm going to be doing that in a little bit. So I want to start out by saying how much I appreciate your being with me for all of this time. It means a great deal to me. I just got stopped by a colleague's place after jury duty on Friday and had a really nice conversation and a nice visit. And as I was leaving, he told me how much he enjoyed these webcasts, which really meant a lot to me. So on that note, I'd like to thank Toyota Wholesale Parts. I'd like to thank Gabriel Ride Control, Kia Motors, and Mitchell One for making all of this possible. You may have noticed that I was AWOL, absent without leave, the last couple of sessions. At least I hope you noticed that anyway. I hope you noticed that I was missing. There are a number of reasons for that, but if you watched the previous weeks or the last segment that we did, talked a lot about closed that webcast, in fact, with a message, and instead of applying it to marketing, I kind of applied it to my own life with regard to doing too much too often for too many people, and somehow losing focus in the process, and I guess that was me. I was trying continually to play catch up with unrealistic expectations, usually that I hold myself accountable to, and while it's wonderful because you get a lot more done than you might otherwise, it sometimes comes at a great cost. So I started to realize that, and I started to recognize how quickly my life was spiraling out of control, and I decided to just pull in the reins a little bit. So these webcasts are going to be impacted by that, at least to some degree. So I'm going to change the nature of what we're doing here and the way we're doing it slightly. I hope slightly. The schedule is going to change, I believe, and that's going to be the most noticeable impact. Instead of holding myself accountable to a schedule of creating a half an hour webcast every other week, with everything else that's going on in the industry in my life over the summer, with our business, with my parents' estate, among other things, I think it's more realistic to just create these webcasts when the opportunity presents itself, or when the need is so great that I feel compelled to really speak about something that I feel is dramatically impacting your life and mine. So I'm not 100% certain that we'll be doing this every other week anymore. I'm going to try to create these webcasts on as much of a regular schedule as I can, because I think they're important, and actually they've proven critically important to me personally, as I regain a certain amount of focus on our own business and the things that I want to put into play there. So there's a lot of reasons for continuing regardless. So in that regard, we're going to still continue our discussion on marketing, because I don't think we've finished it yet, and I think that getting some kind of closure and a deeper understanding of what marketing is all about and what it means to you and me, because there are so many people out there competing for our marketing dollars all the time. I mean, there isn't a day or a week that goes by where you or we're not getting telephone calls from somebody who's going to tell us with absolute certainty how they're going to change our lives for the better by supplying us with new customers, and inexhaustible supply of new and wonderful customers. And I don't know about your experience with all of that, but quite frankly, I've been disappointed far more often than I've been amazed. So I think that this discussion of marketing and advertising and bringing new people to our door is critically important, and with it, I think equally as important is the return on investment that we're supposed to get from it, and the amount of money we're supposed to spend in order to do that. And perhaps the most important issue of all, and that's recognizing the relationship between car count, average gross margin, and revenue, and our success and the amount of money that we make. And I think far too many of us get caught up in a battle for revenue and a battle for car count that, quite frankly, I'm not sure we're ever going to win, and I'm not sure that the victory isn't going to be hollow because it's not what we think it's going to be. And we'll talk about all of that as we move along through this discussion. I guess in a way that means that you're going to have to monitor the workshop site, workshops, searchautoparts.com. You're going to have to monitor Facebook to some degree, and you're going to have to monitor the motorage.com/Mitch site for Schneider's World to figure out exactly when these things are going to happen. We're going to try and push those messages out to you as best we can so you're not searching for these webcasts, but they'll still always be available on the workshop site and on the motorage.com/Mitch site. So we're not going to leave you hanging in that respect. I got to tell you, in the long run, I think this may actually result in more webcasts because of the current technology that we have available, and the fact that through my iPhone or through my iPad or through the Logitech camera that I have that's attached to my computer, we can probably put these together almost on demand whenever something comes up, and I feel that I have something worthy to contribute to this great discussion that we've started, in the sense that I'll be able to record my own thoughts and feelings about things that are going on in the industry. And I'm going to try and do that more and more, because I think that this is a much more intimate way of communicating, and has a lot of advantages. And as I'm about to point out in the discussion to follow about marketing, this is all about connection. And I think over the last year, those of you who've been watching this on a regular basis and I have connected on a very different level. And because we've connected, we've formed a relationship. And because we have a relationship, we are more likely to listen to one another on a different level. And I want you to think about that as we move forward, because that's going to be a big part of the marketing message that I have for you today. So before I go any further, I want to thank you for hanging in there with me through the last year. It's been an incredible year. We've created a tremendous repository of very rich information that I think is going to help a lot of people, or has already helped a lot of people. At least that's my great hope. And I'm going to try and keep to the schedule as much as I can and keep providing as much information as I can, as long as I feel like I have something to contribute. In the meantime, let's go ahead and start talking about this issue of marketing again, and maybe finish up on the discussion, or at least continue the discussion that we ended with the last segment, segment 55. Before I do that, I want to go ahead and talk about this issue of commerce, because that's what this is all about, really. I mean, when you and I start talking about marketing, we're really talking about business, we're talking about revenue, we're talking about costs, we're talking about service delivery, we're talking about products and accessories and all kinds of things, automotive. But it is commerce in the sense that somebody is buying something and somebody is selling something. And we should go ahead and break that down into two general areas so that we can understand the nature of these interactions when they take place. For the longest time, the largest part of all of the interactions that took place in our industry, and to a large degree that still take place in our industry, are transactional. That means someone discovers they have a need, that need rises to the surface. It's no longer a latent need, it becomes an active need, and it's an itch they're trying to scratch, and by trying to scratch it, they try to find somebody who can help them satisfy that want, need, or expectation. And they find a place, they come in, they buy the service or the product, and they leave. Case closed, game over. If you're the service provider, you hope beyond hope that that person will come back at some point in time and buy something else from you, that you've impressed them enough with your technical ability or your service delivery so that they'll want to come back. Not sure how well that works. Transactional companies are generally higher volume, lower margin kinds of operations. The ultimate transactional business might be a Walmart, I guess, where you have a need, you want to scratch it, you go to a Walmart, you buy whatever you need, you leave. If the next time you need something, you happen to be driving by a Costco, you go to a Costco. If the next time you need something, you're driving past a super Target, you go to a super Target. You're buying a commodity product from a commodity service or product company, and it doesn't really matter where you go or what you do. The price is going to be relatively the same wherever, and service delivery is probably going to be at an acceptable level at any of those places. I can name a half a dozen drugstores, Walgreens, Save-On, any one of a number of places like that. Same thing applies. You can get any one of a number of products at a minimally acceptable level of service delivery, and you're happy and you're home free. But there's a whole other universe of product and service delivery that I think gets ignored too often when we start talking about commerce, and that's the relationship or relational types of transactions that take place, relationship-based transactions that take place. And those are, you can't really say enough about those. That's the kind of a relationship where somehow you manage to get somebody's interest. They're searching for some place that they can go where they can develop a certain level of trust and understanding and knowledge and familiarity with the person with whom they're dealing. And once that process begins, it becomes deeper and richer and more meaningful to both parties in the transaction. You should have that kind of a relationship with your doctor. You should have that kind of relationship with your attorney. You should have that kind of relationship with any one of a number of other professionals in your life, your accountant. And I don't see any reason, as a matter of fact, I see every reason that's the kind of relationship you should be striving for with your automotive service customers. Relationship-based commerce is harder to build, but it's also much harder to destroy. So if we look at these things more objectively, you can look at this transactional type of a relationship as being generally product or price point focused. Usually kind of bare minimum in its aspect, fairly impersonal in many respects. Get in, get out, get whatever it is you need. Generally demand driven, which to me means that it's something that comes up and you think about it and all of a sudden you've got an itch and you want to scratch it, you want to get it taken care of right now. You're driving along and your oil change service reminder light comes on and you want to get an oil change regardless of where you are or who you get it from. It doesn't really make a big difference to you. So it's demand driven and almost random sometimes with regard to the choice that the consumer makes for service. And, I've always said that I divide the universe up into many different parts. And when it comes to the business that we have, there are, vehicle owners, motorists, there are who are potential customers. There are customers, that's somebody who comes in every once in a while. And then there are clients. And you want to build your business on the clients that you develop over time. A client will schedule in order to bring their vehicle to you. A client will turn their life upside down so they don't have to take their vehicle someplace else. A motorist, a vehicle owner, someone who's not a customer yet or somebody who's not become a client yet is more than likely going to be looking for convenience more than commitment. Relationship-based kinds of interactions are different. They tend to be richer. They tend to be interpersonal, deeply personal, in fact, over time. They're based on a deepening and recurring relationship that becomes so powerful and positive over time. It's really hard to damage. It involves a reciprocal kind of knowledge that each party develops over time regarding the other, so that your clients know a lot about you, and they know a lot about the people who work for you, and those relationships are meaningful to them. And quite frankly, you know a lot about your clients and their families, and we call it at our shop our family of families, so that you become deeply involved in their lives, not perhaps on a personal or a direct level, but certainly in knowing which of the kids are graduating from high school or middle school or kindergarten, and where they're going to school and where their lives are going. And not just because you want to give somebody the sense that you're interested, but because, frankly, you're genuinely interested. You've gotten to know these kids since they were little, and they've grown up in your shop or under your eye over a long period of time. And perhaps one of the most important parts of this relationship-based interaction, interpersonal reaction that we're talking about, is that it can be scheduled and managed over time. It's not generally going to be a drop-in kind of a relationship. It's going to be, hi, my service engine soon light came on, I need to schedule an appointment. Or, hi, it's time for my normal 5,000-mile checkup, I'd like to schedule an appointment. Or, hi, we're going on vacation this summer and I want to bring the car in a week or two before we leave. What a concept. Bring the car in to have it looked at before we leave, instead of bringing it in an hour and a half before you're supposed to head out on your vacation because you've got this noise that you've been listening to for a month and a half. I think it's important to recognize that one can lead to the other. Generally speaking, you could make a good case for the fact that a transactional relationship can be, over time, turned into a relationship or relational based interaction. But I think you should be aware of the fact that it takes a great deal of effort, it takes a great deal of energy. It's almost like catching a fish with one kind of a lure or a fly when you go fishing, and then switching to a different kind. It's not necessarily the same dynamic. Consequently, there are other things that are involved. But I think it's also important to recognize the fact that this is only going to move in one direction. You can take a transactional client and ultimately turn them into a relationship-based client, a relational client. But realistically, you're not going to go the other way. You're not going to take a transactional, you're not going to take a relationship-based interaction long-term and then start turning it into a transactional relationship. Because if you do, what you're going to find out is you're going to lose it. It's going to fall apart, because it's not going to fulfill whatever it was that particular client was looking for, what that particular motorist was looking for. And you're not going to wind up satisfying those wants, needs, and expectations anymore. So they're dangerous. So with regard to direction, to a large degree, where you end up depends upon where you begin your journey. If you start out seeking transactional customers, that's pretty much going to define where you find yourself in business today. If you start looking for relationship-based clients, if you start looking for people who are also looking for what you're looking to give them, for a relationship, for intimacy, when it comes to knowing who you are and what you're all about, then you're going to have a very profound, strong, resilient, dependable business that you can build over time. I think it's really critical to stop and think about that, and it's always good to have the end in mind when you start any of these journeys. So, if that's what you're looking for, if you want a deeply personal, demanding to a large degree, because it is deeply personal business in which you get to know your customers and they get to know you, that's where you need to start out, and that's what you need to build. How you market to those customers is equally as important, because it's going to be very different. Transactional customers are interested in convenience, price point, product, very finite things. Relational customers are interested in the relationship. They're interested in getting to know you. They want to be able to trust you. They want to know who you are and what you're all about. They want to know where you are in the world, where you are in your business, and how that business is going to satisfy their wants and needs and expectations. Regardless of who you market to, you might as well start out recognizing the certain principles involved in marketing. And probably one of the most basic and most well-known principles in marketing is an acronym, AIDA, A-I-D-A. Now, AIDA is fascinating because it is the premise upon which most of today's contemporary marketing and advertising is based. Probably the most important of all marketing and advertising acronyms, I would guess. And it stands for attention, interest, desire, and action. And the way it works is really simple, is you have to get somebody's attention in order to go ahead and go any further at all. Once you gain their attention, once you have them looking in your direction, you can do whatever you need to do or whatever you have to do or whatever you think you must do in order to gain their interest. They have to be interested in continuing that discussion, going a little bit further. Once you have their interest, you have to create some kind of a desire for them to go forward. And then you have to go ahead and intensify that desire to the point where they're willing to take action. So it's AIDA, A-I-D-A, attention, interest, desire, action. You may not know about those. You may not have heard of that before, but frankly, if you start to analyze your processes and you start to look at what you're doing in the course of running your business, especially in the course of marketing, it's all there. The formula is important that flows out, the formula that flows out of AIDA is important because there are certain fundamental principles that are involved in this that are critical, especially in developing a business that is going to be more transactional in nature than relationship-based, or more relationship-based than transactional. So you have to start out by saying, okay, fine, how am I going to gain this attention? This attention has to result in some kind of following communication. That following communication has to be bidirectional, or it should be bidirectional. In other words, it shouldn't just be in one direction. It shouldn't just be coming from you going to the client or the motorist or the customer. If it's all one directional, if it's unidirectional, if it's a monologue, that's all it is. It's you telling somebody else something they may or may not want to hear. If it's bidirectional, at least you have the opportunity to get feedback and find out whether or not what you're communicating to your clients is of interest to them. The interest is critically important because that's going to take you to the next step, which is a connection. Once you gain their interest, you've really got to try and figure out what it is you have to do to go ahead and connect with that customer on a deeply personal and emotional level. So once you connect with that person on a deeply emotional level or on a personal level, then you can go start building a relationship. And once you've built that relationship, everything will flow from that point forward. Certainly it's easy to talk about all these things, but the question then becomes, how are you going to do it all? Two of the things that really get left out of this discussion of marketing is this concept of connection, and something else that's probably equally as important, and that is the idea of permission. Okay, I don't think that either of these two things can be overstated when you're talking about marketing. There are too many people demanding our attention today, demanding our attention every day as if it was their right, as if our attention wasn't a privilege. They demand our attention as if they are entitled to it. And I'm not sure that that's 100% accurate. The resentment that flows from that is pretty obvious. The frustration that you feel when they call up on the telephone, or when they send you stuff in the mail, or where they pop up on your internet screen and you can't get rid of them, should be self-evident to all of us. The anger that results, the mistrust that flows out of that, and ultimately the concept of avoidance, either putting them in your spam filter or just deleting the email, or coming up with any kind of an excuse not to have to talk to them, is something that most telemarketers and most mass marketers have learned to deal with very effectively, and most service providers or business owners like you and me still have a great deal of trouble with, and it creates a tremendous distraction and emotional turmoil that none of us need. So this idea of having permission to continue the discussion, I think, is critically important. And I think that this whole idea of permission, as Seth Godin pointed out in his book Permission Marketing, has to be the result of what I'm going to give you, what I have to offer you, what I have that you would like some of or more of, in order to continue that discussion. And thereby, by raising your hand and saying, it's okay for you to talk to me, but I expect something in return, that's fair. That's interaction in the marketplace. And I think that works out. So when we talk about connection, we have to recognize that this is required for any kind of meaningful relationship. And that's in business, in life, in marriage, in friendship, all the way through. Everybody wants to be Norma Cheers. Everybody wants to walk into a room and have everybody turn around and say, hey, how you doing? How you been? What's happening? How are you? And be genuinely interested in where you are and how you're doing. Everybody wants to be recognized and appreciated. And that doesn't matter whether they're employees or vendors or customers. That's a basic human want, need, and expectation. You can't ignore it. You can't avoid it. It's part of who we are. It's part of being human. It's part of being the species. And I think it goes deeper than that. Really, if you've got pets and you've had animals in your life, then you know that they want to be recognized and appreciated equally. So I think that's part of being on the planet. That's the price of admission. So everybody wants to be recognized and appreciated for who they are and what they bring to the party. In this case, what they bring to the relationship. And that goes for you and me. You know how you feel when you feel like somebody's taking your effort and your sacrifice for granted. And customers are no different. So we need to recognize that and appreciate that. When we talk about permission, which is equally as important, without permission, there is no relationship. You know, I've told my kids, I've told my friends, I've told everybody that you only can control, and I've told you actually in a number of these other segments and in my writing over the years, that you only control one half of a relationship. All you can do is what you can do to maintain that relationship. And if you're not being, if nobody's meeting you halfway from the other side, or if nobody's meeting you at all from the other side, then you don't have a relationship. So we have to recognize that without permission, there is no relationship. And it becomes important to gain that permission, to garner that permission. Somebody has to raise their hand and say, yeah, it's okay. It's okay for you to go ahead and communicate with me. It's okay for you to treat me as a client or a customer. It's okay to send me stuff in the mail. I'll read your stuff. I'll ignore everybody else's stuff, but I'll read your stuff, okay? But before I let you do that, before I let you enter into a relationship with me, because I'm kind of guarded about relationships. I've been burned in the past. I don't trust everybody, and rightfully so. I've got a lot of distraction and chaos in my life. So before I let you come into my life, and before I give you permission to communicate with me, I want to know what's in it for me. I want to know what the WIFM is. I want to know what in it for me. What's in it for me? What are you offering me for my attention? And then I'll decide whether or not it's meaningful enough for me to go ahead and continue. Now, and the problem with all of this is noise. The problem with all of this is the thousands of choices that you and I have every day. The problem with this is all the other people who are vying for your attention, all the other people who are demanding that you listen to them while you ignore everybody else. I mean, one of the big problems that you and I have just in getting through life today is the number of choices that we have. I mean, go into a pharmacy, go into a Walgreens, or go into any kind of a pharmacy and try and figure out what kind of toothpaste you want. There are 27 different kinds of toothpaste for only, for one kind of teeth, or shampoo, or interesting for me to be talking about shampoo, huh? But shampoo, or any one of a number of other things, a number of breakfast cereals, aisles and aisles of breakfast cereals. So I mean, the choices are myriad. They're overwhelming. So that's one of the biggest problems that we all face is the noise, the chaos, the choices. And the question that comes up all the time, and that's in a world of too many choices, more choices than any human being could possibly deal with. Why should I choose you? And that's a question that you have to answer for yourself and for your client. You have to recognize that consciously or unconsciously, subliminally, they're asking that question. Why should I choose your service facility? Why should I let you work on my car? Why should I go ahead and be inconvenienced because you're not open on Saturdays to bring my car in during the week and have you work on it? What's in it for me? And once you start to answer these questions, and once you start to understand these questions on a different level, your marketing is liable to become lots more effective. And that goes doubly for anybody who already has someone who's taking care of their car right now, regardless of how good or poorly they're doing. If they've already got someplace they're taking their car on a more or less regular basis, and you want them to switch and come to you, then you've got work to do. It's not so easy. I mean, think about it for a second. How likely would you be to leave your doctor if you had a relationship with your doctor that went back 5 or 10 years and it was satisfying? That you trusted your doctor. You felt that they were a good practitioner, and that they were going to take good care of you. How likely are you to leave your dentist for another dentist if you're satisfied with the dentist you have? How quickly are you going to walk away from your accountant or your attorney or the bank that you're dealing with if their performance is satisfactory? And notice I didn't say overwhelming or incredible or terrific. I'm just saying satisfactory. The fact is that you could do it under the right circumstances and under the right conditions, but the conditions and the circumstances would have to be right. Something would have to happen. There would have to be an event. And we need to understand that. So that's a consideration, especially if they have somebody in their lives, your customers, if they have somebody in their lives who already does what you and I do. I think I'm going to close on this note, and that is that it's an expensive proposition to get somebody to change. It's expensive to go ahead and communicate with somebody. It's expensive to get their attention. It's expensive to go ahead and enter into a relationship with them. It's expensive to make that connection. All of that takes time. It takes money. It takes effort. It takes energy. And it's frustrating because it's not a direct science because we're dealing with human beings. So it's not 100% causal. It's not going to be if this, then that. It's just not going to happen that way. So I'm going to close on this issue of marketing expense and to some small degree, return on investment. We can pick things up from there next time. The first thing we have to recognize is that marketing is expensive. It's kind of interesting. I was coming home from jury duty last Friday, mandatory in Ventura County, and I think all throughout California actually, but certainly in Ventura County, there really are no excuses for getting out of jury duty. So I was on my way home and I was passing by a colleague's shop, and I haven't seen him in a while, and I really happen to like him a lot, and we were talking about a whole bunch of other things. Really nice conversation, just about life in general in the industry, sort of topically. And we were talking about marketing ultimately, and he made mention of the fact that in one specific area of marketing, with one specific marketing tool, he's spending $3,500 a month. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for anybody's shop. And when somebody tells me something like that, I can't help myself. I immediately start to work the numbers over in my head to try and see if they make any sense to me. And let me share with you what was going through my mind. I have to tell you something. He's 100% satisfied and convinced that this is a terrific program, and I'm not going to do anything to convince him that he's wrong, because it very well might be. I just want to understand more about it, and consequently I'm going to look into it further myself so that I can get a better sense of what it's all about. But he's spending $3,500 a month. Now, what does that mean? There are a number of different ways to look at that, but one of the ways to look at it is that if your marketing or advertising expense is supposed to be 4 to 6% of what your sales are, think about that for a second, 4 to 6% of what your sales are, then in order to justify a $3,500 marketing expense, your sales have to be a minimum of $59,000 a month and perhaps as much as $88,000 a month, but that's just for that one tool. If you do any other kind of marketing, you need to add that to the total and then sort of project what your sales ought to be for you to be able to afford that kind of an expense. But the one thing that gets left out of that equation, quite simply, is what is your gross margin? How much money are you making? I mean, you could be doing $88,000 worth of sales and only capturing a point or two or 2.5 or 3% of that. If that's the case, can you afford to spend any money on marketing or advertising? I'm not sure. I don't think you can afford not to spend it, but I don't know where it's going to come from with margins that low. So we need to talk about the relationships that exist there as we move forward. But I think about these things all the time. Is that what does your return on investment have to be in order to justify that kind of an expense? And the way that you figure that out is by taking whatever the cost of the expense is, whatever that expense is, and then divide it by your net operating profit, because that's going to tell you how many dollars you need to generate in order to go ahead and have those dollars to spend. And that's only if you don't spend them on something else first. So as we move forward, I think the relationship based on the foundation that we've created on understanding what margins are and understanding what gross margins are, understanding what net operating profit is, understanding the need to market and how important that is, recognizing that you have to spend dollars on marketing, recognizing you have to have some place to draw those dollars from, and how many dollars is the right amount. You know, my attitude with that, quite simply, is that no matter what you spend, how little or how much, if you're not getting any kind of results or the results that you want, it's too much. So the return on investment becomes really important. In closing, I want to share a quote with you. It's a quote that a new friend and new colleague sent to me in a very short speech that was delivered between the National Association of Life Insurance Underwriters in 1940. This is before even I was born, okay? About the common denominator of success. Perhaps you've heard it before. If you haven't, it's something that you should probably write down and paste up on a wall someplace. In the speech, this Albert Gray said that the common denominator of success, the secret of success of every man who has ever been successful, lies in the fact that he formed the habit of doing those things that failures don't like to do. He formed the habit of doing the things that failures don't like to do, don't want to do, aren't willing to do, aren't interested in doing. And I think that's an important quote. I think that's probably one of the most important life quotes you're ever going to hear. So I wanted you to think about that, and next time we get together, we can talk about that quote and what it means to you or me. If you want to go ahead and email it to me, a response, I'd love to hear from you. Until that time, I want to thank Kia, Toyota Wholesale Parts, Mitchell One, and Gabriel Ride Control for their participation in making all of this possible. I hope you show them your support in the best way possible, and that's by getting more information on their products and services and taking advantage of what they have to offer. These are all companies that are very deeply involved in supporting the industry, so keep that in mind. Till the next time, stay well, take care, have fun. Don't do business with anybody you don't like, and there's probably a good reason that you don't like them. There's no need to find out why. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you.